The U.S. has supplied the Ukrainians a tremendous amount of weapons and ammo, but what effect has it had on U.S. readiness, and have the Europeans contributed their fair share? Hi folks, and welcome back to the Storm and Cellar. The Russian-Ukrainian war has been dragging on since February 24th, 2022, and although I believe it's coming to a head, the U.S. continues to deliver massive amounts of arms to Ukraine. Hey, if you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. I think everyone realizes that the Russian army has a far superiority in numbers of tanks, aircraft, and weapons than the Ukrainian army. However, the Russian military is still relatively antiquated compared to the more sophisticated U.S. and some Western European nation weapon systems. In fact, thus far, besides the mere tenacity of the Ukrainians to fight and win on their homeland, it's the Western armament that's keeping the Ukrainians in the fight, and quite frankly, inflicting quite a heavy toll on Russian forces comparatively. But just how much has the U.S. and NATO nations provided to Ukraine, and has it been equitable for the U.S.? Since 2014, the United States has provided Ukraine more than $45 billion for training and equipment. And this week, the Biden administration announced an additional military aid package to Ukraine of over $1.3 billion for additional weapons. However, that's not the total cost or the story to the American taxpayers. Provided here are some interesting stats by the Council of Foreign Relations. The total bill is $76.8 billion to include humanitarian and financial aid, security and assistance, and of course weapons and equipment, and grants and loans for additional weapons and equipment. Of course, this doesn't even touch gutting of the U.S. military weapon stockpiles, leaving a scenario of the U.S. meeting a possible China or Russian threat like a man showing up at a gunfight with only a knife. For example, the U.S. has given over 10,000 Javelin missiles, 70,000 anti-armor munitions, 1,700 Stinger missiles, 4,000 TOW missiles, 35,000 small arms, and a plethora of other weapons and support equipment. Now, when it gets into heavy weapons, the U.S. has been pretty darn giving with those as well, with artillery, tanks, and armored personnel carriers, not to mention almost 3,000 support vehicles like Humvees. The U.S. also sent numerous air defense, air-to-ground missiles and rockets, and Harpoon coastal defense missiles. Naturally, my concern here is that if any of these weapon systems are captured, the Russians will have no problem in reverse engineering and or replicating U.S. technology. Let's not forget fighter jets, such as the forthcoming estimated 3 squadrons of F-16s that will be given to Ukraine through third-party European countries and should arrive by the end of the year. I personally believe there'll be too much, too late. As you can see, the Biden administration and Congress has been pretty darn forthcoming with U.S. taxpayers' money. But how about Europe? How much have they contributed? This chart shows a comparison of U.S. versus other nations, and in particular European contributions. Now, the U.S. economy versus the EU economy is $25 trillion versus $19.8 trillion, respectively. This equates to the U.S. having a 26% higher gross domestic product than the EU. However, countries in the EU contribute significantly less to Ukraine than the U.S. In fact, the EU, Germany, and UK have contributed $63 billion versus the $77 billion the U.S. contributed. That means Europe is about $14 billion shy of their fair share. Now, is it just me, or to coin a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, something is rotten in Denmark? I know that most of the Western European countries are a bit skittish about giving too much to Ukraine because of their fear of a possible nuclear war. However, the Eastern European countries who truly believe Russia is knocking at their door gave, although meager, a fair amount of support. Further, their support in comparison of their GDP is more than the Western European countries gave. I've said it before, this is basically a European problem, and if they believe strongly enough about defending Ukraine and sending a strong message to Russia, then they need to belly up more support. The U.S. should be very cautious in providing weapons to Ukraine and utilizing heavily on their economic, diplomatic, and informational instruments of power, as well as possible humanitarian support. letting Putin know that the U.S. is committed to Article 5 of the NATO treaty and that an attack on any NATO nation is an attack on the U.S. would definitely be important to make Putin think twice of further advancement of Russian forces into any NATO nations. However, sending a signal of aggression to Putin through weapons transfers definitely sends a signal of U.S. aggression, heightens the risk of the threat of nuclear war, and finally, while raping U.S. weapons reserves for a potential future war with China. Okay, y'all let me know what you think by leaving your comments below. I really want to hear what you have to say about this topic. Also, share the channel with your like-minded friends. So until next time, make sure your takeoff and landings equal.